Welcome back to the Holistic Podcast. Today we are going to be focusing on hormones and maybe drifting into a little bit about cancer and how hormones can affect that. Joining me today is our star of the show, Katrina Ellis. 30 years of clinical experience, specializing with oncology. Round of applause.
Thank you, everyone.
Start this off. If you had to explain hormones to a 12-year-old girl, how would you describe what they actually are?
So probably the easiest way to explain it to 11 or a 12-year-old is that basically hormones are little chemical messengers that play roles in the body. So they help to stimulate things, they perform roles, and they change at different phases within your life. So they're very important for things like your mood, your energy, your growth, and so many different functions that are important to human life.
Cool. I like that. Which are the main hormones women need to know about, and what does each one actually do?
Okay, probably the most common ones that we should be focusing on or we know about are estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, follicle-stimulating hormone, and luteinizing hormone. There are other hormones like, of course, cortisol, DHEA, like these other hormones, but maybe we'll keep it around the kind of female fertility kind of area. So estrogen basically helps us to get curvier hips, beautiful boobs, like it keeps us virile, it keeps our bones in place. So it's got all of these kind of growth factors that play a role. Progesterone is basically our happy hormone, right? So if we don't have enough progesterone, it can affect neurotransmitters and it can really affect our mood. And it will drive things like PMS and other mood-related disorders. It also is very important for holding a pregnancy. So it's got a multitude of roles to play as well. Testosterone for a female is our confidence hormone. Right? So it basically gives us, confidence. It boosts our dopamine. It gets us out there. It gives us libido. So women also need testosterone, not as much as a male, but we need testosterone also, right? And then we've got basically our follicle stimulating hormone that helps an egg mature every time during the month, and the luteinizing hormone, which helps to release it, all controlled by the pituitary gland.
Cool. I like that. There's a lot.
There's a lot, but I kept it simple.
All important.
Yes.
What does a healthy menstrual cycle look like from day one to the end? Just simple.
Okay, I'll keep this really simple. A healthy menstrual cycle should be generally from about 28 to maximum 31 days. So if it's, say, 24 or 25, it's a short cycle. If it's ranging 35, 36, it's a long cycle. It should also be regular. So if our pituitary, which is a master gland in the brain, is working well, the timing of our cycle should be following that consistently and maybe be changing a day or two according to the moon, right? So the moon has an influence on a female cycle as well, right? So if it is doing that, and generally a good cycle will be basically from day one of bleeding, we might have just a healthy little 1 or 2 hours of a little bit of heavy blood, right? Not too much clots in there, nice red blood as well. And then it should peter out over the next few days. That's basically a healthy menstrual cycle. By the time you get to the 2 weeks and you're starting to ovulate, that's when we start to get more virility. We're more attracted to men. We've got that beautiful drive going because it's intuitively and also hormonally linked to when we want to get pregnant if we're in those years. So once we're leading back towards the bleeding phase, our progesterone should be rising. If it doesn't, then we'll start to suffer from a lot of PMS and symptoms like that.
Okay, so are PMS, mood swings, and painful periods are they normal or is it just common?
It's very common and it's not normal. So a good cycle shouldn't experience a lot of pain and we shouldn't be going through a lot of PMS. But we'll find because of all the hormone imbalances now within society, and I think a lot of that has to do with a lot more stress, a lot more toxins and chemicals from the environment that are mimicking hormones. So what's happening now is women are getting higher levels of estrogen, their progesterone levels are dropping, and it's driving quite severe painful periods, very emotional, a lot more PMS, moodiness, dysmenorrhea, all these kind of issues. So no, it's not normal. A normal cycle, yeah, we might get moody a day before. Like I love to have a fight with my husband a day before I get it, but it's always on timing. I have a 1 hour fight like the day before, which I know my period is coming, right? But building up for 2 weeks before your period is due or you bleed is not normal.
And so on that, what are the most common signs of a hormonal imbalance that you see?
So there's a myriad of different signs, but as we said, the period and ovulation is a really good sign. So we shouldn't have any pain. Pain is not normal. A small amount of pain, a bit of cramping can be a sign of magnesium deficiency. So there can be a little bit, but it shouldn't be where a lot of women shut down for a day or two. We shouldn't be getting migraines, a lot of headaches, a lot of clotting with bleeding, painful periods, extreme fatigue, incredible bloating. We can get mild symptoms, but we shouldn't be getting all these dissipating symptoms that can take us out for a day or two. That is not normal, and it's a sign that we have to fix the balance properly.
What kind of imbalance or hormones out of whack do you see contribute to that?
Okay, probably the most common ones would be, as I said, low progesterone levels, low testosterone levels, too much of the wrong form of estrogen in the body, but even low estrogen can contribute as well, the good estrogen. So they're probably the most common ones. Follicle stimulating hormone, once we start to get towards perimenopause and we start to get, surges in follicle stimulating hormone because of hormonal balance, then we might start to get night sweats, heat at nighttime. All of these kind of things can throw the body out. But normally it's involved with probably those 5 main hormones, which can be imbalanced by things like high cortisol, stress, insulin imbalance, all of these types of things. So other hormones can drive these imbalances.
Is there any sneaky signs that women don't really recognize that are like a big red flag for hormonal imbalances?
Like small signs are you talking about?
Small signs that, yes, people wouldn't really pay attention to per se.
Yeah, like even like we just said, just little things like bloating around the abdominal zone. So often that bloating, they go, oh, it's food related, but they don't realize in a lot of cases it can be hormonally related. Another one can be constipation. So we go, oh, I'm more constipated. That can be hormonal too, because you need hormones like progesterone to stimulate peristalsis within the gut. So, and that also has an impact on bloating. So abdominal bloating, even fluid retention. If we're carrying too much estrogen, our body starts to get very fluidy and puffy, and a lot of us won't relate that to a hormonal imbalance, but often it can just be hormones that's actually causing that. Right?
Interesting.
Yes.
So is there a way for women to tell the difference between I'm just stressed or my hormones are genuinely out of balance? Or is it more of like a roundabout of like cortisol affecting hormones? You know what I'm saying?
Well, yeah, everything is a knock-on effect from one other thing within the body.
Yeah.
But you can measure that to see what is causing what. Like for instance, if I've got pyrrole disorder or pylorrhea, which is a genetic malabsorption condition, and it's stripping magnesium, zinc, B6 and gamma-8 from the body. The problem with that, we need those nutrients to rise progesterone, and that could be causing hormonal imbalance. But then again, the lower hormones could also be rising up the pyrroles, right? So they are absolutely interrelated. The most important thing to do to define where it's coming from is you can do some incredible testing. The problem with blood testing is often blood only carries 15% of your hormones. So you're only getting a 15% picture or snapshot of what's really happening in the body. Right?
Why is that?
Because blood only carries that. That's the medium of it, right? So, and it's ever changing constantly all the time. So you go and have a blood test. If it's not carrying that hormone, they go, oh, no, you're fine. You haven't got a hormonal balance. Meanwhile, you're sweating at night. You're getting PMS, you're cranky, moody, and they say, no, you're fine, right? But this is not the case. The best way to measure it, the most accurate way, is via saliva and via urine, right? So often if I want to know what's the start of the problem, where is it coming from, then I'll get a urine test done, which could be a Dutch hormone test. It could be a beautiful endomap test, or I can even do a snapshot and I'll get a saliva test at day 3 or 21 to give me an accurate picture of where perhaps progesterone, testosterone, or the hormones are sitting. So the best way is definitely to do a saliva or a urine hormone test, and that will give you an accurate picture.
Okay. Let's go through the life stages now. We'll keep it brief for each of them. But what are the biggest hormonal challenges for teenage girls right now?
Okay, I think some of the biggest challenges this is an interesting fact, is that many years ago, the average age of menstruation would have been around 13, starting 12, 13. The average age now is getting down to 9 and 10, right? So, and even 8. So young girls are starting their periods much younger than what used to happen in the past. And people are questioning why. Why are the periods starting so young? I always say it's not bloody rocket science, right? It's our environment is loaded with so many microplastics, forever chemicals, heavy metals, and hormones in the food, and everything that mimics a hormone. So you imagine at a young age, they've got so much more exposure and so much more to deal with that the body doesn't know the difference between that and estrogen, right? And so all of a sudden it thinks, oh, okay, I've got enough, so I'm going to start bleeding now, right? So this has been the biggest challenge, is that at a young age, these children have a much higher toxic burden than what we did, say, 20 years ago, which is why periods are starting at a younger age. The other problem is because of this toxic burden with chemicals, heavy metals, and this toxic load that we're getting from the environment and from foods and even in the air, because even now we've discovered microplastics, we're getting more from just breathing now, almost a credit card size a week. And all of those microplastics that enter the bloodstream mimic hormones, right? So they've got this to deal with. So what's happening now is girls at a younger age are getting more hormonal symptoms, heavy periods, endometriosis at a young age, heavy bleeding, things that never used to happen as commonly in the past, right? Because of it, but they are going and getting put on oral contraceptive pills at a much younger age.
And how does that have an effect on them?
Well, the interesting thing is medically, that's the way it's dealt with. So basically, even in the past, they'd say, okay, you've got hormonal acne, you've got, period pain, we'll whack you on the oral contraceptive pill, right? Now, the oral contraceptive pill is different. There's many different types. Some are higher in estrogen, some are estrogen and progesterone, some are slightly higher in progesterone, some are just progesterone, right? And they basically put them on these artificial hormones at a young age. And it will definitely suppress a lot of the symptoms, but it leads it into a greater problem later. So one thing that happens is girls never work out their natural cycle.
Okay.
Because it's basically feigning miscarriage every month once you go on the pill from a young age.
Yeah.
So imagine that happening every kind of month. By the time a girl wants to go off the oral contraceptive pill, their pituitary doesn't know its natural timing anymore. And they start to get irregular periods. They don't know what their cycle is. It can reduce their chances of conception, mess with fertility, all types of things. So it may suppress things at a young age, and it might suppress some of their pain and different types of things. But what will happen later, it will lead to a much bigger issue.
No way. I actually had a friend who skipped her period for 2 years just on the pill.
Yeah.
And then she got off it. And she had her period for like a month or 2.
Oh, my God. It's so crazy, isn't it?
Insane.
We were given her pituitary for a reason.
Yeah.
It is our beautiful 24-hour timing system. And if you're suppressing it through something like the oral contraceptive pill or something similar every month, then basically it may not know how to function anymore, and it can take many years to get it back into its natural timing again.
What would you suggest for parents to do to support their children so, they're not blossoming too early per se?
I think it's a really great idea. I did it with you kids. Not that I was thinking those kind of things, but when you were babies, back then we only had hair testing for heavy metals. Now we can go and do beautiful mineral testing, check heavy metals on spot from when they're a baby and see if they've got a toxic load already at a young age. So I think it's really important. I did it with both you and your sister, but basically what I did is I did some hair testing, found out that you had high arsenic levels from eating too many grapes that weren't organic, right? And I used like a fermented chlorella drops when you were a baby and I detoxified it. So it wasn't mimicking any bad hormones within your body. So it's interesting. It's really great to start with kids when they're little. The other thing I think is really great now is we have access to incredible DNA testing. So you can test a baby's DNA through saliva at birth, find out how all their genes detoxify, how their hormones work, if there's any thyroid issues, and you can start correcting these things when they're little by knowing what foods they should eat, what we have to be careful of. How do you detoxify the home environment, which can be a great thing. So look at things like now I think the biggest toxin with kids are EMF, right? Yeah. They're starting on what's the biggest babysitter in the world? A mobile phone, right? So you see babies starting on mobile phones, iPads and that at a very young age. Now the problem is that EMF radiation, what does EMF do? That basically stops iodine absorption or blocks iodine. What is iodine good for? Hormone balance, right? So it's starting from a young age. So I often say to parents, get their iodine levels checked through a urine test, put a bit of iodine on their feet at nighttime. I used to do that with you kids, right? Put it on the feet, beautiful way to absorb. It's not overloading their system. And it's chelating any toxins, heavy metals out of the body. So there's some great little tips. When you have a bath, put some Epsom salts in the bath. You can use clay in the bath to draw out heavy metals and toxins. So look at natural ways to detoxify from a young age.
Interesting. Let's move on from, younger women now.
Yes.
Women that are in their 20s to 30s, what are the top 3 biggest mistakes you see them make that affect their hormones the most?
I'd say, let's have a look. What would affect them most?
I'll give you, I'm gonna have my matcha, I'll give you time to think.
The 3 biggest mistakes.
Yeah.
Oh, I would say by the 20s and 30s, this is not a mistake, but hopefully most of them are realizing the oral contraceptive pill wasn't the way to go, right? But a lot of women are still on the oral contraceptive pill, and that's a big mistake because by the time they're starting to get probably into their late 20s or mid-20s, they might be considering fertility, right? Or having a baby even in their late 20s.
Oh, yeah. I think you said they might be infertile.
No. But it can definitely lead to some infertility for sure. So I think that's one of the biggest issues is because if they don't go off that, their body's already used to 10 years of a pill suppressing that, and their pituitary may not come back in, or it could take many years to kick back into cycle. That's one thing. The second thing is diet. Diet has a big impact on hormones. So if you're eating the wrong types of foods, you're not including things like cruciferous vegetables in the diet, which contain indoles and they clear bad hormones. So if you don't have a nice balance with diet, you could be creating a lot of the issues through the foods that you're eating, right? Third one probably is over-exercising. So yes, we need exercise, but we don't need like full-on kind of intense exercise, because with a lot of people that raises cortisol levels, or a lot of women, raising the cortisol then has a blocking action on other hormones within the body. So I think there are a few things like that that can have a definite impact, on your hormones, and it's something to consider as well. It's probably a good time to start looking at, am I balanced with the moon? It's something I've always done since a young age. I've been a naturopath since I was young. So when I was young, I used to read Francesca Naish. She was amazing. She was a naturopath that worked with fertility and the female cycle. And I learned through her how important it was to get in sync with the moons.
No,
Yeah.
Why is that important?
Super important, right? We're all controlled by lunar cycles. You know, the moon has a pull, you know, as well. It's got its own kind of tidal pull. And women should be falling in sync with either a new moon or a full moon. So they've discovered if we want to be more fertile, if our ovulation falls in sync with a full moon, it actually doubles the chances of fertility, right? So new moon is the complete opposite, right? And so generally when we meet a partner, we're in love, you know, we've got that desire, I really want to have a baby with you, all of that, you'll find that your cycle starts to fall out 1 or 2 days and comes in with a full moon. So you start ovulating within a full moon. And instead of having 2 to 3 hours chance of conception, it could be 2 to 3 days. So it actually increases it.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
That's insane.
Yeah.
How do hormones change when...
I just want to talk about babies.
No,
Let's move on now.
it's funny you say that.
Yes.
How do hormones change when a woman is trying to conceive or during pregnancy?
That's exactly right. It's true. So your hormones definitely change. I mean, we've got pheromones when we're attracted to someone, and it improves our ovulation, our estrogen when it starts to rise. So when we're attracted to someone around that ovulation time, you know, we get a boost within our hormones, our testosterone, our estrogen levels, and it actually increases our chances of conception, you know, as well. So that's like really important. The other thing is if we're stressed about the whole process, cortisol has a blocking effect on our chances to conceive, right? So a lot of people don't realize that, but when you start stressing about having a baby and it's all on a time schedule and it's not natural anymore, cortisol actually starts to block a lot of those fertility hormones.
Interesting.
Yeah. Yes.
So I gotta pull up a question. I don't know a lot about pregnancy. I gotta be honest. But while women are pregnant,
yes,
what is happening with their hormones?
Oh, so your hormones are changing for sure. So, I mean, you need certain types of hormones to conceive anyway. You need higher amounts of estrogen, your body producing it to conceive. To hold the baby, you need progesterone. If you don't produce enough progesterone up to the 12 weeks, you will miscarry, right? And there won't be implantation of the embryo. So that's absolutely really important as well. So we start to get a change within the balance of hormones within the body when we're actually pregnant. As we go through each kind of trimester, the hormones change again. So because the baby's developing at different areas and they need different minerals, different hormones, different types of things. And even in that last month, we need different hormones because we've got to prepare the uterus for conception. So it's really important to eat and supplement the right nutrients within each cycle, right, to grow a beautiful, healthy baby. But the hormones will change. So a common thing is if we find that a woman keeps miscarrying, we need to measure and see, is their thyroid out of balance? Is their progesterone actually rising? If it isn't, are there natural things we can do to keep those levels high so we can keep the baby past the 12 weeks? And then after that, it's not as important because the baby has already implanted.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. What kind of hormones should women keep in check while they're pregnant?
Yeah, so definitely, I mean, the natural ones are your HCG, which is to do with I'm pregnant, right? And they will measure that it's rising at the right ratio, and that's a sign we're pregnant. But you have to keep, like I said, you've got to keep your progesterone in check from that 12 weeks because that's when implantation is possible, right? If we lose it, we can miscarry. And you'll see this with IVF and all these things all the time, but even with natural conception. So we have to keep a check on the thyroid because the thyroid, if it's out of balance, can create some infertility as well. So we're looking at all of these different hormones. Normally, if I follow a woman all the way through pregnancy and I'll see them each trimester, we measure all the hormones, but we also measure all the mineral levels because in the second trimester, it's the laying down of all the beautiful fine features in a baby. And that's when we need lots of minerals, make the eyelashes long, make all the fine features. It's true, you know, and you start to get a bit of cramping as the body starts to change. So just like any cycle in the human body, like pregnancy has its own natural cycle with hormones, and we want to keep them in check each trimester.
Okay, interesting. let's move on from pregnancy and
Yes.
talk about perimenopause.
Okay.
What is it?
Okay, so perimenopause is technically considered the 10 years before you end your periods and you reach menopause. So they say 10 years. It could be anywhere from 5 to 10 years. And it's where hormones start to shift, right? We're past our fertility time. We've meant to be already have babies, and we're starting to move towards that menopausal age. So it's basically a time where hormones shift and we start to see subtle shifts within progesterone and estrogen levels and even testosterone as well. And that can start to create some unwanted symptoms in females. Mood swings, not sleeping well, even hot flushes at night or excess heat in the body. And we have to define whether it's actually perimenopause or something else going on in the body, right? Because perimenopause, just like things like ADD or ADHD, POTS, all of these things are being thrown out there as the cause of everything now, right? So it's important to define, am I actually in perimenopause and can I help correct this, or is something else going on that I'm unaware of?
Interesting. So how can women support themselves during perimenopause?
I think number one, it's important, like I said, to work out if it is perimenopause. And if it is, then we can just start to do subtle shifts to hormones so we stay in balance. A good example is a lot of women will start to look at things like troches or adding hormones or artificial hormones as well. But you can also look at natural kind of solutions. There's some amazing herbs out there and some great, products that people make, to bring that natural balance. So they will normally include things like, just as an example, chaste tree, which raises progesterone, peonia extract, things like black cohosh for estrogen. So in nature, there are incredible plants and herbs that were created to have a natural effect on raising hormones or decreasing hormones. Right? If my testosterone goes too high, I can take spearmint and it drops the testosterone, to bring balance. So they're designed in nature to bring this natural balance, which is so beautiful that we have access to these. Foods are the same. So a lot of people don't realize there's certain foods that, for instance, parsley can make more progesterone, right? We can have flax seeds or sesame seeds to increase our estrogen. So there's beautiful foods in nature that have natural chemicals that have an impact on hormonal balance. One thing I really love, and I'm a bit of a fan of, is there's some new forms of maca that have been discovered that work on the HPA axis, right? So instead of giving you the hormone, they tell your body to create the hormone it needs to put you back in natural balance. And I've included those in some of my new hormonal formulas.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Are there any kind of signs that women usually brush off when they're going through perimenopause, but they're not aware that they're entering perimenopause?
Yeah, generally there's probably a lot, because as women we're trained to just keep going, right? Keep working, keep the household going, keep everything in order. So we might push a lot of these things away and not realize we're starting to go through hormonal changes. They could be things like, I'm reacting with my children or my husband a little bit more. I'm not getting into that deep sleep that I should be getting into, because basically hormones can affect things like melatonin and serotonin, and sleep starts to become lighter. I'm putting a bit of weight on around my tummy. Is it that or is it something else? Can we define between the two? So things like weight gain, lack of sleep, mood changes, even things like your hair thinning out, that can be a sign of hormonal imbalance.
Interesting. So what does a healthy transition into menopause actually look like?
So a healthy transition should be basically not experiencing too many changes in symptoms or too much high and too much low. We should be able to transition. I mean, we look at the old days and they used to say women would go into menopause and a lot of women wouldn't even know. They'd just get a ceasing of periods. They wouldn't be going through all the hot flushes, the intense symptoms that we are getting now as women. So you can see women are basically going from perimenopause into menopause and getting some horrible symptoms that can last for years. So they're basically they don't feel like themselves anymore. They're teary, they're angry, they're not sleeping at all. Their whole life has changed from this transition. I think a lot of it is to do with the fact a lot of people don't realize is that the ovaries, when they start to shut down, we have these two little adrenal glands that can take over about 8% of the function of the ovaries, right? The problem is we've been stressing all our life, running on our little adrenal glands, burning them out, that they have no ability to naturally take over the transition, right? If we were to support them more and look at adaptogens, look at de-stressing more, going to bed early, all types of things to not burn these little, and not having as much caffeine, all these little things, we might be able to glide through the transition a lot easier.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I want to pedal a little bit back to the pill, and because I had a question I want to ask.
Yes.
I think it's asked.
Yes.
If a woman wants to come off the pill, what would you suggest they do to support themselves while they do that?
Okay. A couple of things I absolutely love, if we're going to transition off, is to look at things like the herb chase tree or Vitex agnus castus. So Vitex basically works on the pituitary, and its job is to bring back a 28-day timing, right? So it's one of the most important herbs to incorporate if you want to throw the periods back into a normal timing. So I would always say the pituitary kicks in around 7 a.m. and 4 p.m. So you would take your chase tree around that time, both times during the day, and you'll find that it can bring that natural cycle back in a lot quicker. That's one great way. Second thing I love, acupuncture. Right? Acupuncture is amazing and at balancing all of the endocrine glands within the body. So it's also very good at bringing timing back. So I love doing something like chase tree with acupuncture is really good. So that's another thing that you could definitely do. The reason chase tree is also good is for women that experience hormonal acne, because it can be really good at stopping a lot of that hormonal acne from coming out on the skin. That's two kind of basic things you can do transitioning off the pill. You can also look at other beautiful herbs to bring balance. And you could basically, once you come off, do a hormonal endomap, see where the hormones are sitting and bring them into natural balance through the right diet, through the right lifestyle techniques, and also the right herbs.
Interesting. I want to get into HRT.
Okay.
What do you think?
Oh, gosh. Okay. Tricky subject here.
By the way, this is all personal opinion.
Yeah.
This is not medical advice.
Yeah. Okay. Let me say, I'm not 100% against HRT for some people. Well, okay. My problem with it is, there's a lot of podcasts and people and experts and that saying that women need to take artificial hormones. This has been a big kind of focus. I do think we're starting to go back towards the natural way again of balance. The reason why they're saying if we don't take those hormones, we're going to get osteoporosis, we're going to age quicker, we'll wrinkle faster, all of these types of things. Now, the problem with traditional HRT is it does carry an array of risk as far as cardiovascular problems, stroke, heart attack, if you're taking it, right? The other problem with it is getting balance. How do you get balance? So if you are put on some sort of HRT, are you checking it monthly? Are you doing a saliva or urine testing to see where your hormones are sitting? Most cases, no, right? So what can happen is you can start to push too much estrogen, too much progesterone, and they can have a detrimental effect on other parts of the body. So if a woman was to go down the track of using troches or something like that, it needs to be tested well, right? And I also say, isn't it better if we can get the body back into balance again, right?
What do you mean by that?
Okay, well, let me say is, for instance, when we're going through teenage years, we need different hormones. When we're going through fertility, we need different hormones and the body will produce them. Once we get to perimenopause, we don't need as many of those hormones. And once we get past those years, we definitely don't need all of those hormones, right? So the body we go through transitions at different stages in our life, 0 to teenage years, teen to the 20s, and the body requires different hormones during that time. We're messing with it so much. We're thinking, okay, well, now in my 50s and 60s, I need what I had in my 20s, which is not true, right? So the body has a natural transition. So, for instance, when I am in those menopausal years, I need a bit of estrogen, but I don't need as much estrogen because I'm not having a baby, right? This is a perfect example. So if I can get my adrenal glands to be working beautifully, I've got this nice HPA balance, I'm eating well, I'll get as much as what I need without artificially shoving more estrogen into my body that could give me a higher risk of hormonal cancers, right? Because there comes the risk. If you're adding more hormones in to the body and you've already got hormones and you're not testing it well, that excess will attach to receptor sites and drive up more risk of hormonal cancers and other types of problems.
What kind of hormonal cancers do you see that are usually linked to HRT?
I won't say direct link to HRT because we're not, apparently it's unproven, right? But it
Do they say that?
Yeah. Well, no, they do say it is, but often the doctors will say it wasn't caught from that. So it's let's just say it's a contributor to your hormone load, right? So if you're on HRT and you're stressed and you've got an environmental load of estrogen and you've got genes that don't detoxify it properly, right, and you've got all this load, then it can actually drive the risk of, if we look at hormonal, endometrial, uterine, breast, all these types of cancers. But now they're also linking hormones to driving other types of cancers like bowel, lung, brain tumors. So it's not just sitting in that hormonal area. It could also drive a risk of other types as well.
How does it do that?
Because too much hormones or the wrong types of hormones stimulate things, right? So we know they stimulate growth. So, for instance, too much estrogen will stimulate breast lumps to grow, fibroids to grow, ovarian polyps, endometriosis, all these conditions, because it has a stimulating effect on growth. Same with androgens with males. Too much of the wrong forms of estrogen can make things grow, prostate cancer, testicular cancer. But now they're saying it can also have a stimulating effect on other types of cancers as well, right? So basically, yes, hormonally is the most common, but there could be other links out there towards growth because it's not natural in the human body to have that much excess.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I want to talk about mental health a little bit.
Yeah.
How closely are women's hormones and their mental health connected?
Irrevocably.
I didn't even know that was a word.
Yes. What? I don't know where I got that from. Oh my God, so 100% connected. Like, it's very interesting. If you don't know why you're going nuts when you're going through PMS or through perimenopause, it's basically science. Okay. So what happens is, say, as your progesterone is dropping or your estrogen is dropping or rising, it has an effect on important hormones like serotonin, GABA, and dopamine, right? So they basically work as a team, right? So if one drops, the other one drops, and then basically we go, oh, I'm worried, I'm anxious, I can't sleep. And it's because it's affecting the levels of, say, serotonin. So serotonin's job is to make us fall asleep at night, anti-anxiety, anti-worry, uplifting, right? So if we have a shift within progesterone and estrogen, it directly affects those neurotransmitters and we mentally become unstable. No, look.
Yeah.
Not quite unstable, but
a little
unhappy,
bit.
teary, whatever it may be.
Yeah. So is there a way for women to, support a bit more emotional stability without like shaming themselves for being sensitive?
No, that's true. Naturally, as females, we are intuitive and sensitive, and it's beautiful.
Yeah.
But if we're over feeling it, there could be an imbalance of our hormones. So I always say different cycles through your life, coming to perimenopause, rule out if it is perimenopause and do a urine hormone test, see if something's out of balance and start to raise them. A lot of women don't realize it can work indirectly the other way as well. So a good example is if I think my GABA is low. So GABA, meanwhile, is produced in the brain It keeps our muscles relaxed. It stops us overthinking, panicking, having fear. If I'm starting to get those symptoms, I could boost my natural GABA production through things like theanine, magnesium, zinc, B6, precursors to GABA, glutamine. And basically that will have a direct effect on hormones, right? So I can do it both ways. Very interesting.
That's cool.
Yeah. So I do believe, there's certain things that are really needed for females, even as they start maturing, and they're things we're going to use up a lot of magnesium. I mean, a simple start is a mineral like magnesium. How many roles does it play a day? 300. And a lot of those are to do with making every neurotransmitter and every hormone.
Interesting. That gets used up a lot.
No.
So if women do suspect that they've got hormonal issues,
yes.
I know we've spoken just a little bit about testing, but what test would you tell them to get done?
Okay, so if you are suspecting hormonal problems, a quick test is a saliva hormone test. So that's quickly, turnaround time's really rapid. If you're bleeding, you need to do it at certain times in your cycle is more accurate. I like day 3 and day 21. The other bigger kind of way is to do a urine endomap or a urine Dutch profile, which is a really extensive one. And it looks at everything. It looks at melatonin, cortisol, DHEA, E1, E2, E3, progesterone, testosterone, every hormone, right? So it's looking at everything and how imbalanced they are with each other. And there you can pinpoint the problem and go and work on that. Yes, you can ask your doctor to do some blood testing, but like I said, blood is only a tiny snapshot, although it is very good at measuring FSH and LH levels. So if you are suspecting perimenopause, you need to get those tested to see if you're running out of eggs, right? Because women always go to me, well, how do I know if I'm in perimenopause? Estrogen and progesterone on its own is not going to tell you. You need to get an FSH and LH blood test done and see if your FSH is rising, is there any changes with luteinizing hormone, and that will tell you if you're at a period where you're running out of egg supply.
Interesting. Are there any kind of markers that, people overlook that actually have a big impact on hormones?
Definitely. Oftentimes with hormones, we're not measuring all our androgens either, SHBG, which is a binding globulin. So there's a lot of markers like that that can have an impact. Another good example is B6. If we look at B6, it directs estrogen metabolism. We're also concerned about B6 because the overload in the body, from supplements and things like that. So now a lot of women aren't taking any B6, and it is starting to affect those estrogen pathways. So I always say it's important to look at things like DHEA. So if you're going to have a hormone test, don't just do the basics. Often the doctors will go, let's just do progesterone and estrogen. That's not getting you a clear snapshot. You need to look at your thyroid function, your TSH, your T3, T4, your reverse T3 that could be blocking it, cortisol, DHEA. Look at the entire picture so you can get a holistic approach to where your hormones are sitting, just not this tiny bit, because the problem then is you become like anyone else and you treat that, but you miss the whole.
What should women do or how should they advocate for themselves, or how should they move on from a point where a doctor says, look, we've done the test, your labs are normal?
Yeah.
What should women do when they've been told something like that, but they feel like something's wrong?
Well, this is where I feel it's really good to see a naturopathic doctor or someone great in that kind of area that understands a lot about hormones. And oftentimes you are told you're normal through your bloods. And as I said to a lot of people, a blood does not show everything. If it's not showing it, advocate for yourself and push for urine testing, push for saliva testing. There's some great labs out there now that allow you to also do it yourself, right? So there's some incredible online labs that allow you to go and do that testing, to have a look at that. They have naturopaths that can suggest things. I still think it's great to see a professional, right? Yeah. Because we understand the balance between all the different hormones and we look at you as a whole. But if they're saying you're okay and you're not, push. And like I said, get more thorough testing done, because I guarantee the whole snapshot is not being tested for.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
I want to move on to a little bit of a different segment.
Yeah.
Lifestyle.
Yeah.
First, how much can food actually move the needle when it comes to hormones?
Oh, well, food can shift it. It's very interesting because I always say supplements do not work without food.
Okay, why's that?
Because you could be taking all the best supplements in the world and be eating the worst diet and you'll never see a shift in a person ever. So foods have in there something a supplement can never replicate, right? So often supplements, they're great, but a lot of them are man-made and they're isolated. Yes, there's some whole food supplements, but foods carry within them an array of accessory nutrients, minerals, enzymes that cannot be replicated, right? So when you're having foods, they have a holistic effect on absorption, on shifting things within the body. So I always say diet is the most important, and lifestyle, of course, because you could have a great diet and the worst lifestyle in the world, and you're rooted, because if you're not sleeping and you're out partying and drinking and that, but you eat a great diet, you're kind of counteracting everything good that you're doing, right? So what was that question again?
How much does food actually move the needle?
Oh, it moves it a lot. So I would say it's, basically the right diet can be 70%. It's like losing weight. We go exercise, but have a crap diet, right? Or not a great diet. And you're never going to shift your metabolism properly. Diet to me is 80 to 90% of all of that. And exercise is about 20%, right? And it's the same with hormones, right? If you're eating a diet that's full of chemically sprayed foods, you've got, your microplastics in there, processed foods, what are you doing? You're burdening your elimination systems, can't clear estrogen, progesterone's dropping, massive impact, on hormones. You can change so much through diet.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, a perfect one is progesterone. If you're not having good natural fats in the diet, everyone's scared of fat, but fat is good. You can't make pregnenolone to make progesterone and your other hormones. So pregnenolone is the precursor hormone to progesterone and every other hormone in the human body. And you know what it's made from? Cholesterol. And what's cholesterol made from? Good fat absorption.
There's been a lot of negative connotations attached to fats, and especially cholesterol. But it's literally the building block for most hormones.
Oh, my God, yes.
Especially when it comes to males too.
Oh, so true, isn't it?
Is there anything else you'd like to add?
Yeah. About cholesterol? Yes.
Before I move on. Okay, tell me.
I get very passionate about this.
Yeah.
It disturbs me, when firstly this whole statin kind of nation thing, but, they're being whacked on statins all the time to block cholesterol because their cholesterol was slightly above the border. And then they start to get, I'm losing my memory. I've got no testosterone. All these other problems start to happen because we need cholesterol to make neurons for brain health. And we also need it to make hormones. So then we start to get all these hormonal issues. And they say, I've been whacked on it because they say I have a risk of cardiovascular disease or I've had a heart attack. Do you know most strokes and heart attacks are not caused from high cholesterol at all? But they're whacked on that medication. Most times it's caused from inflammation, which makes the blood stickier, right? And that's what will often cause a blood clot. Oftentimes with atherosclerosis, that's caused from heavy metals that attracts calcium into the arteries, right? It's not from high cholesterol, right? So there is a lot of fallacy out there about cholesterol. Yes, there might be 1% of people that have high cholesterol genetically, but you can still bring it down naturally without blocking the entire cholesterol, right? As soon as you go on these cholesterol blocking medications, you start to get dementia and memory problems. And that is a known fact.
How does that happen?
You need cholesterol to make neurons in the brain. So it's for our myelin, our neuron health. Cholesterol is a part of actually creating that. So cholesterol is involved with memory, right? As soon as you start to go on cholesterol blockers, you block the ability to create that, right? And you start to see they start to get dementia and memory problems. And this has been known about for 20 or 30 years. This is a known fact, but it is a big medication in the world. And like I said, some people may need it, but most don't, right? And I would do your own research first. There was a great research study done years ago, and they released a documentary on it called Statin Nation. Look at that and make your own decision. Right.
Okay, I want to talk about sleep and hormones.
Yes.
And what happens to women that are consistently getting bad sleeps?
Okay, well, first we need to say, is it the hormones that are creating the bad sleep or the bad sleep that's driving the hormonal issue?
Okay, let's talk about both.
Okay, so not sleeping well, which could not be hormonal, could be something else. The problem is when you're only getting a small amount of sleep. Sleep is when we renew everything in the body. We heal. We slow down angiogenesis. We renew our bones. Everything healing occurs while we're sleeping. So we've got this short window of not sleeping. The healing process slows down. The other thing that starts to happen, we start to get an imbalance of our hormones or our stress hormones in the body. We become more wired. So the next day we start pumping up more reverse T3, adrenaline, things like that due to lack of sleep. And that starts to block natural hormone production. Right. So it has a big impact in that direction. The other thing is if our hormones are out of balance, it affects the neurotransmitters that control sleep. Right. So it happens that way as well. So progesterone starts to drop. Yeah, we all know as a woman, I couldn't sleep last night, and we're at a certain stage in our cycle. And perhaps our progesterone has dropped. That's affected our GABA. Our brain is more wired at nighttime. So what happens is those hormones, as I said, basically, and if we look at estrogen and progesterone, affect GABA and serotonin. They help control us going to sleep and staying asleep. So if we're starting to get an imbalance of those hormones, a lack of sleep becomes a problem. And then we don't sleep, adrenaline rises, cortisol becomes imbalanced, and we're in this vicious cycle where we feel like crap, basically.
Okay. How are gut health and hormones linked?
Once again, the gut is everything. Look.
Should we put a pause real quick? I need to
go. Yeah, go.
How connected are gut health? How connected is gut health and hormones for women?
Oh my God, the interrelation between the gut and hormones is unbelievable, right? Let me throw a word out there, estrobiome, right? Okay. So we have what's called our estrobiome within the gut, and women are going, what the hell is that? So what the estrobiome is, they are gut bacteria that control the breakdown of estrogen within the gut. Okay. So if those bacteria are out of whack, out of balance, and they won't break down estrogen properly, we start to get all types of issues like weight gain, bloating in the gut, too much estrogen excess through the body, mood changes, all types of things that are controlled by that beautiful little bacteria within there. They also help to metabolize progesterone. Progesterone, for instance, basically stimulates bowel motions, right? So if I don't have enough progesterone, it can't stimulate that peristalsis, and we start to get constipated. The estrobiome becomes affected. We get too much estrogen, and that can lead to PMS, endometriosis, adenomyosis, all types of issues. So they are intricately linked.
Okay, interesting. Mm-hmm. What about the liver?
Oh, so the liver is absolutely amazing. So it plays one of the biggest roles in clearing sex hormones or hormones from the body. So the liver works by two phases. We know phase one, which has 450 cytochrome enzymes, and some of them are specifically to bind to estrogen or to bind to progesterone to encourage their metabolism or clearance from the body. And then we have 6 pathways in the second phase of the liver: glutathionation, glucuronidation, solvation. So all these beautiful pathways. The liver's job is to metabolize these into healthy pathways, right? If the liver is overloaded, we're eating the wrong foods, taking the wrong alcohol, caffeine, environmental toxins, and those phases are overloaded, or we have genetic homozygous phases where they're not working as well and we're not supporting them, it can throw out more of the wrong forms of estrogen. It won't metabolize cortisol correctly. So it has a massive impact on filtering and metabolizing hormones in the human body.
Okay, I know you mentioned caffeine, alcohol, and all that. What habits hurt or help your liver detoxing?
So what tends to hurt the liver is definitely having too much alcohol.
Yeah.
That's one. So alcohol, recreational drugs, stimulants, all of these types of toxins overexpressed, the liver has to detoxify. So that can be harmful. Having a lot of processed foods, the trans fats, sugar, those types of things makes the liver have to work harder and detoxify more. So the wrong diet can really hurt the liver. Not getting rid of or clearing your toxic burden or your toxic load can hurt the liver as well. So those habits are probably the worst habits, for your liver function. Some of the best things to help liver function is water, drinking the right type of water, because look at this. It's filtering, is it 3 pints of blood a minute, right? And your body is 80 to 90% water, right? So if I'm dehydrated, what will happen? The blood will become thicker and the liver becomes sluggish in its ability to detoxify. So water is your number one key to get the liver working well, right?
Yeah, interesting.
Then you can have a look at other amazing things, like people love to take things like St. Mary's thistle, schisandra, burdock root, bopalarium, all these amazing liver supporter herbs, or teas like red clover to support its function. And there's certain foods which are really good for the liver too. So any bitter food is good for liver function. Rocket, endive, dandelion, olive oil, great for liver, so there's some incredible lemon juice, some incredible foods in nature that can support liver health as well. The other really good one is sweating. Right?
And what's that?
Well, imagine the liver. It's got a lot of jobs to do. It's clearing a bloody lot of microplastics and toxins and hormones every day.
Yeah.
So if we start to sweat, but I'm talking about sweating through near-far infrared saunas, some healthy sweating, basically we're taking the burden of the liver's ability to detoxify, and we're detoxifying through the skin, right? So that can be a great accessory treatment. Another thing I really love, and I use it a lot because I do a lot of oncology work, is encouraging people to do coffee enemas.
Okay. How's that help?
And not everyone needs this, right? But doing a coffee enema, what it does is it encourages the liver or boosts a huge amount of glutathione when you do that. And what that does is it pulls the toxins out through the liver, taking the burden of the liver's ability to detoxify. So it can clear a lot of old waste, a lot of debris, everything from the body quicker, at a quicker pace, rather than everything having to go through the liver and we have to go through the process of detoxifying. So little tricks like this can be really useful.
No, that sounds cool. Do you have any stories that just first come to mind about how you helped women with hormonal issues? Let's start it like this. What were their issues? What hormonal issues did they have?
Yeah.
What kind of testing did you do? And how did you help them? And then the results.
Okay, so I've got countless. Oh my God, I have so many great stories.
Yeah.
Let's just start with a beautiful young girl, that I met, and luckily she was open to all types of testing because she'd been in incredible pain. She was normally out for 4 or 5 days with a period, couldn't go to work, was an analgesic, all of these drugs and everything for the pain, and she thought that was normal. Her hair was falling out, her skin was dull. Basically that had been happening from a young age when she was just whacked on the pill, I basically looked at her and said, can we do all this testing? So we did gut microbiome testing, we did DNA testing, I did mineral, heavy metal testing. I also did hormonal testing as well, endomap, and I looked at her 2, 4, and 16 urinary estrogen, different forms of it, progesterone. So she let me do everything, which was great, right? I'd already worked out through doing her iridology, and I could see she was fermenting within the gut. So I basically started with gut health, right? Because I knew her estrogen wasn't good. All her symptoms were pointing to excess fluid, bloating, and so I knew she had an estrogen excess already. So starting off, what I did is I worked on her gut health. So basically I cleaned her diet up, worked out the inflammatory foods, took them out of her diet, removed the mycotoxins and the molds from her diet as well, because a lot of people don't realize that mold is found on lots of different foods. And if your glutathione pathways aren't working, you can't remove them and they'll just add to your hormone burden. So we did that for 6 weeks. I put her on a low yeast, low mold diet for 6 weeks. I gave her some natural things to get her stomach acid up. I sealed up her gut lining. I gave her a beautiful estrogen modulator. And we did that basically in the first 6 weeks. Wow. When she came back, and I didn't even have all the testing back yet, the change in her was phenomenal, right? She dropped 6 kilos. Her next period, she had no pain. First time since she ever started bleeding to not have pain. She couldn't even believe it. All her food cravings had disappeared because she was craving sugar all the time. She didn't want sugar at all anymore. Her skin was like absolutely glowing, beautiful. I kept, following her for the next 3 or 4 months. And the other interesting thing, her hair never grew. Right? So her body was taking all its energy away from the hair follicles and it would actually not grow at all. So she just had to keep cutting it and it would never grow past this kind of phase. So within the next 6 months, all of a sudden her hair was long. Her hormones were perfect. Her timing was perfect. She had no pain with menstruation, sex, or ovulation as well. She had a normal bleed, a light bleed, and her whole life changed. And now she could hold iron. Because she was bleeding so heavy, she was getting low iron levels. Her low iron was throwing the thyroid out. And so she was constantly tired, fatigued, and everything naturally just corrected itself. And she was basically like the 21-year-old she should be. So that was a beautiful story. Cool. And I have lots of them, but that's just one simple story.
Nice.
I started with the gut microbiome. I worked with the DNA, and then that balanced everything.
So what was the biggest levers that you saw whilst working with her?
Do you mean levers like change or things I used?
The
diet?
biggest levers that you implemented or changed that caused the most drastic result?
Okay, so the biggest things I implemented was definitely diet, number one. Diet, and I did use some incredible supplements. They were my ones, right, that I'd made. But I made them to clear because I knew she had excess estrogen, low progesterone. So I used something natural to boost up her progesterone, to clear excess estrogen, and then work with gut health at the same time. So I implemented them while I made those diet changes. So I did that straight away. I've got an incredible machine where I can actually measure straight away their inflammatory foods. So I took all those inflammatory foods away, started to heal her gut lining. So her estrogen changed as well, and a good bacteria started to thrive. That started to direct estrogen down the right pathways, and I could see her fluids started to disappear. When I use an estrogen modulator, there's a lot of different estrogen modulators you can use, but the one I used basically had all of the different modulators in it with liver support until I could work out her DNA and her natural pathways. So I brought that in straight away. It was quite simple. We didn't give her much. I basically only gave her 4 or 5 things, which is quite light, when we look at supplements, because often with oncology treatment, I might be using, 10, 15 different types of things because we need it. But with her, I kept it simple and I worked on the gut health. And that started to shift her mental health really quickly because as soon as she started to lose fluid, she got no pain with the periods, she wasn't bloated anymore. She could see the shift and then she started wanting to do things more and more. I also took out the heavy sugars and carbs out of her diet.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how did that help?
Oh, massively, because I took that toxin load away and that insulin resistance, which was throwing her cortisol levels out. So just going back to, I primarily did not full carnivore, but I went carnivore just with certain types of vegetables, more cruciferous, so we could clear the bad hormones. And the shift in her was remarkable. Right?
Interesting. So you're removing like high GI foods.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, which is really important for a lot of people. Some people can keep some healthy carbs within their diet, but other people, when it's drastic, and depending on the constitution, I always say, because when I photographed her eyes, she thought her eyes were hazel, but she was actually blue underneath with an orange heterochromia, which is telling me she had a lot of insulin resistance. So I knew that was the first path to start with her, and the shift was remarkable. And then once I got all these answers back, it was really easy to tweak everything.
Damn, interesting. So what supplements did you give her of ours?
I gave her bloat free to build up stomach acid. I gave her tummy tonic to seal her gut lining. I put her on estro sweep, which would clear all the bad estrogen through the body. I put her on Fem Harmony to get her pituitary to go back to her natural timing and to boost up her progesterone levels. And then I put her on some Mag Power to help her with sleep, cramping, and all of these types of things. And that's all we did.
Okay. So why did you need to increase the stomach acid and seal the gut lining?
Okay, so basically when I met her, there was a few other things I found out as things evolved, and I suspected it that she had extremely high pyrrole levels, pyroluria. So when we got the levels back, they were close to 100, right? They're neurotoxic agents. What they do is they strip the body of magnesium, zinc, B6, and gamma-linolenic acid. That affects the ability to make stomach acid, and it also makes your lining become permeable or leaky. So I knew before I even got the number back, I knew that was happening with her via her symptoms. She was emotional, teary, fatigued, tired in the morning. So I knew she had all the symptoms of pyroluria. So basically I knew I had to start. How you fix high pyrrole levels or pyroluria, you have to start with the gut. The old way of doing it, and especially with integrative doctors, was to throw them on huge amounts of zinc and B6 and magnesium, which made them sicker, right? Because people with Pyrroles, if they take zinc, they feel nauseous and they want to vomit, right? So putting them on them, they'd never get to that balance. But I worked out over many years of working with this and methylation problems and DNA that you actually had to start with the gut first. Start with absorption, start sealing the gut lining so your body could actually absorb. Then when you know a number, it's easy to get the number down because you're absorbing now. It's that simple.
Interesting. Yeah. Always comes down to the gut.
Always comes to the gut.
So is there any of our supplements you would suggest to women they should take, like, before they see someone?
Yeah, I have created some incredible supplements that could be available for everyone. So I have 2 amazing medicinal mushroom extracts in liposomal form. I did separate it. I used to have a product just called I Am Woman, which was just for hormones, and it was meant to cover perimenopause and menopause. But I realized there were 2 separate situations. Yeah. So I actually changed them. One called Evolve for perimenopause to help shift us through perimenopause and those subtle changes within estrogen and progesterone. And then I created a separate one called I Am Woman for menopause. So for when you stop bleeding, that's with I Am Woman. So basically the perimenopausal supplement would have things for metabolism, to shift your progesterone back up, help with mood, all of these types of symptoms we start to get during perimenopause. Whereas when I looked at the I Am Woman, I added an incredible form of maca to that, some aged hops extract, so things to keep the metabolism going beautifully, but also to help with bones, to help with libido, all of these types of things. So I have these 2 beautiful formulas which can be taken for anyone, basically, because if we look at medicinal mushrooms, what are they? Adaptogens. They help your body adapt to stress and change. So that's where they can be beautiful. For younger women, I've definitely have Fem Harmony, which can be used for bleeding ages. That's a beautiful formula. And Fem Harmony basically gets your pituitary back into timing. So very good if you've got PMS, your timing is out, you're trying to throw it back in, fertility, all of these types of things. Then I have Estro Sweep for things like fibroids, endometriosis, anything where we're getting an estrogen excess within the body. So these are some of my favorite ones. And then, of course, I've got Breast Nurture, right? I love women, so I'm creating things for women. Like I love making things that reflect for myself, and I test everything. And I know this because I've been through all these cycles and I know they actually work. Right?
Yeah. I think that's what makes our supplements so much different and better, because a lot of people, they'd search up, this is good, they'll chuck it all into a capsule.
Yes.
But all the ratios are wrong, and usually
so true.
The actual ingredients are pretty lackluster.
That's right. Yes.
But since we're here, we're constantly testing people, seeing what actually works.
Definitely.
So the feedback loop is quite quick.
Oh, so true. And luckily I work with local Australian manufacturers, and as soon as we notice, okay, we've got to tweak this because clinically this is what we're seeing, we can do it like that.
Yeah.
So our formulas never stay exactly the same. They're always evolving and becoming better based on clinical evidence and daily science, which is incredible. So that's what I love.
I think that wraps it up for today.
That's great.
It's our longest episode yet.
Thank you.
Tell us if you liked it.
Happy hormones.
I reckon next week we're going to do an episode where we like